Welcome back, guys. So in the last lesson, we saw how quickly the London could be torn apart, especially if you're playing Nakamura. And in this video, I want to show the best approach to kind of developing your preparation further and intentionally going for maybe more ambitious and tactical lines and how to basically study these variations on your own. So going forward to the position that we've reached in the Beret of Nakamura game, I have a slightly different move order here, but it will be a transposition after knight f3 and queen b6. And one way I study openings is by simply using a database to search through high-level games, search a position like this, see how many times this exact position has occurred. And even though this is a rare line, it's occurred just over 200 times in master level games. The one drawback is sometimes these games won't provide the best insights, and you have to dig a bit deeper on your own to find perhaps some hidden resources or some hidden ideas in the position. Now, of course, here there's two standard moves for white, very safe moves, one being b3, the other being queen c1. I'll go ahead and say queen c1 is the most popular move here by far. I think it's a very respectable move. But usually when I study openings and I'm studying new types of positions, I do use an engine like Stockfish to support my studies and sometimes to try and find new ideas. Now, the top Stockfish move here is queen c1. And sometimes when you're studying with an engine, it can be very easy to just basically press spacebar and have it spit out the first move. And really, there's no value to be gained in that. Sometimes the best approach when using an engine is to intentionally go for lines where you're sacrificing material and see what compensation it can get. And in this position, when I saw the Beret of Nakamura game a few years ago, I was very much encouraged to look a bit closer at this position and see if white could get away with sacking the b pawn. And it turns out Stockfish's second choice here is knight bd2, simply sacrificing the pawn. And turned out just a year ago, so well after the Nakamura game was played, I actually had a game in this line from the white side. Now, I'm not going to show that game, but I do want to show kind of a good part of the opening preparation and also some other techniques in terms of kind of developing out the repertoire further and also finding the later tactical ideas which can exist in the middle game. So we're going to go ahead here. I'll just go ahead and show after queen take b2. Stockfish actually prefers white's position slightly after the move e4. But arguably, it's very double-edged. I mean, black's up a pawn. White has very good center and development. And visually, it seems like white should have full compensation for the pawn. But these types of situations, they're not always easy to prove because, I mean, if black can consolidate and if black just completes development and holds on to the pawn, the temporary advantage can very easily disappear for white. So going forward from here, it's most natural for black to take, and then knight take e4, and now knight f6. And okay, black is finally developed something other than the queen, and now the best move for white is bishop to d3, which is not only the computer move, but probably the easiest human move to play, as white just wants to castle as quickly as possible. So I want to actually go from this position and share like a key study technique, which I think is maybe a bit different than what a lot of players do to study. But sometimes when I'm studying a new position, when there's no games that have been played in it before, and this is already a novel position, what I like to do is actually play it out against a computer. And instead of playing the side that I play, I will play the opponent's side. So in this case, I played the black side, and I had Stockfish just play the moves for white. And I want to go forward here and show how I completely got destroyed from Stockfish, or against Stockfish in this position. I think it will be really instructive to show because essentially what happened is I tried to just hold on to the material, develop, but Stockfish found some very provocative and very resourceful moves to make sure that I couldn't complete development and I was constantly under pressure. So let's go forward here. I took on e4, bishop take e4, and then knight d7. Very simple idea, wanting to bring the knight to f6. White goes ahead and castles, and I f6. And I mean, if black can trade off pieces here, then there will be less tactical possibilities that will exist later. So the general rule, if you have some sort of temporary advantage like lead in development or some attacking potential, you don't want to trade pieces if it's not necessary. And of course, I don't want to trade off the bishop for the knight here. So of course, Stockfish agrees with that and plays bishop to d3. And now I go ahead and play pawn e6 with the simple plan of just bishop e7 and castling. And now it's a question, how does white actually continue perhaps furthering the advantage and manage to create initiative in this position? Now there's actually two main strategies for white. White can either try and slow down black's development and try and open up the center before black can complete development with bishop e7 and castling. Or the other strategy is to simply try and paralyze black and just control as much space and as many squares as possible and try and go for some middle game squeeze, where even though white will still be down a pawn, it will be very difficult for black to make any sort of, or find any sort of active play in the middle game. And Stockfish went for the latter option, going for that middle game squeeze. We're going to see how the game progresses. Went ahead and played very nice c4, just gaining space, maybe fathoming some sort of future d5 or c5. But for the time being, white is still improving the position. Bishop e7. And now another nice move, pawn a4, which seems a bit strange at first, but to try and understand this from a human standpoint, it does very much discourage any sort of break that black can do with b5. Additionally, there's the idea that white is now controlling the a3 square, so black no longer has queen a3 as a possible escape. And additionally, white might just want to play a5 and then take away the b6 square from the black queen, leaving it maybe a bit more vulnerable to be trapped. I went ahead, I just ignored the idea of a4. I castled in this position, and then rook b1 was played, kicking the queen. I played queen c3, wanting to go back to a5. Rook b3 was played, queen a5. And now Stockfish just plays a very simple improving move, which we see so often in the London, knight to e5, which at first maybe doesn't look that impressive. But if we look a bit closer here, it's very hard for black to do anything. And knight e5 basically restricts the one plan black had in the position. I would like to place b6 and bishop b7, but now it's not doable because of knight takes c6, and white would then be forking the queen and the bishop. So already we're starting to see a very nice squeeze from white, and we can safely assume that white has more than enough compensation for the pawn. But I do want to go forward here and show how the computer just methodically destroys me in this position. I went ahead, I was greedy. I took another pawn on a4, realizing that, okay, the queen's not getting trapped, and white will have to prove something here. Stockfish plays another very calm, improving move, bishop c2, with many purposes behind this move. Not only does the bishop align with the queen, but it opens up the rook for some potential. Of course, rook take b7 is a tactical threat, but also the idea of rook h3 just swinging over to the king side. And then the additional idea of some possible queen d3 and creating some checkmating battery towards the h7 pawn. So this is a great move, bishop c2. Usually, if you're the one with initiative, you want to look for multi-purpose moves with perhaps multiple plans in the position. I went ahead, I got my queen out of a4, I retreated back to a5. Stockfish played rook h3, and already there's a very big threat in the position. If I play, I don't even know what waiting move I can play. Let's say I play something like c5, which maybe a break that I would want to accomplish. White would then go ahead and just completely be crushing here with bishop take h7, knight take h7, and queen h5. And the fact that the queen or the rook and the queen form this battery, it's actually unstoppable checkmate, as nothing can really defend against oncoming danger on the h file. So let's say knight f6 or just queen h8 mate. And other than that, okay, black can throw in bishop h4, but that does nothing. So going back to this position after rook h3, there is a threat, and because I'm black on the defensive side, I need to identify the threat and defend against it. So I found pretty much the only move here, pawn g6. Maybe I can briefly show what happens after h6. This just walks into bishop take h6. And Stockfish would just crunch through these lines. If pawn take h6, then there's a very smooth queen d3 with just so much pressure. I think the threat is something just like rook take h6, and then some idea like queen g3 mate, or not mate, but leading to mate. And meanwhile, black has almost no defensive resources to protect the king side. So I play g6, and then the game continues. Queen d3 still, just improving the queen, applying more pressure. Knight d7. And now another nice maneuver, queen e3. Seeing that the queen has a bit more purpose on e3, some potential to go to h6 later. And this is exactly what will happen. As we go forward, bishop to f6. Another nice move, knight g4, targeting these dark squares, hitting the bishop on f6. Also, perhaps considering these ideas of knight h6 or bishop h6. So I play bishop g7. And now after the next move, there's just way too much pressure. Bishop h6, and we can basically see black's doom from this position, as the bishop on g7 is really the only defensive piece that black has on the king side. So rook on f8 isn't really doing that much. And I mean, if I wanted to save the bishop and play bishop h8, then I would just be losing material, and white would still have a monstrous attack. So after bishop h6, I had to basically accept my downfall. I played on just to see the computer's technique. Knight f6, and now another very simple, calm move, knight back to e5. The bishops are guaranteed to get traded, and then the queen is inevitably going to come into h6. And that's essentially what happened. I played c5, bishop takes g7, king takes g7, queen h6, king g8. And now the final tactic. If you want to pause your video and find the way for white to finish off the attack, white to move, and essentially find force mates. And this move, Stockfish had no problem finding. Just a simple knight g4. Simple removal of the guard, given the knight is a key piece defending h7. After knight g4, the knight will no longer be staying on f6. And we can see that mate is just coming in this position. So I hope this was an instructive game. I know that I don't always find it to be the best strategy to rely on just computer moves all the time. But sometimes if you can actively play against a computer, especially if you have the computer play your openings and you play against it, then you'll start to maybe see these tactical ideas. You'll also be more involved in the position if you're playing against the computer, rather than just relying on whatever moves the computer is spitting out. So I hope this can be applied to other lines, and feel free to use this technique to not only study lines in the London, but really any sort of opening or any sort of position in general. This works great for middle games and end games. So hope you guys enjoyed that, and I will see you in the next lesson.